Good morning and welcome to our Thanksgiving webinar. I want to thank you all for giving us your time this Thanksgiving holiday if you're in the States. We're happy to have you here. I'm actually working out of our Japan office and we don't have Thanksgiving here, unfortunately, so I'm missing out on the mashed potatoes and everything else that happens, but we're happy to be presenting to you today. I'm surprised at the turnout. Hopefully everyone's got their bird in the oven. So we're talking today about the future of your forms, and specifically, the theme we're talking about is starting to develop forms again. A lot of people have been waiting for Microsoft to come out with a migration path for InfoPath, and they initially did. They came out with forms on SharePoint lists back in 2014, and that effort died in 2015, as many of you know. And they have now an effort called Power Apps and Microsoft Flow, which do not replace InfoPath. They're not really a migration path. So we're here to tell you that we have a migration path for you, and we want to encourage you to start looking at your forms again. And today we have some interesting scenarios. One is we're actually talking about the webinar, and we've actually created a webinar solution for our webinars. And we'll show you a dashboard. We'll talk about different ways and techniques for laying out a dashboard. And then we'll talk a little bit about why we think it's a good time to plant the bulbs for spring in terms of your forms development and start working on those new projects now as it's cold in the northern hemisphere. So today's scenario, a lot of demos today, so mainly it's demos, but we've got a few slides. And today we're talking about webinars. This is a webinar, and we've created a webinar form to collect the data for the webinar. In fact, I've got the form here on my 365 site. I'm going to switch to it and open up this form. Now this form is actually rendering in FormsViewer. It's an InfoPath form. I'll show you the form and the design in a second. And this form allows us to add information about our webinar. So today's title is time to start developing forms again, right? And I've already entered this webinar in testing for today, so I'm going to call this V2. And you can see here that the FormsViewer looks very similar to InfoPath. There's a few minor changes, but we've taken the InfoPath form and we've just modified it by pointing it at FormsViewer, so that when it opens from the Forms library, it opens in FormsViewer. And today's the 24th, obviously. We've got a rich text field we can add in our bullets for what we had here, dashboards, and so on. And then I can submit the form. My name is obviously Patrick, and we're recording the webinar, and we have a download link, which we'll be presenting to you later. But the idea of this form is to actually capture the details of the webinar, allow us to submit it, and then to send you email when the form is submitted. In other words, if you fill out our survey at the end, very short 4-question survey, mostly just fun questions, nothing really serious, then we automatically send you a link at the end. And so what we did was we uploaded all 197 of our webinars. We've been using this form for many, many years, and what I need to do is show you the one I just submitted. It's still processing all 197 because behind the scenes what we're doing is we are actually generating a PDF. Let's see if I can open this again here. Oh, we got a problem with our demo. It's live. But the form I wanted to show you is this is the form. So this is a form that we've developed. It's very simple. It's got actually I think this is the form we just opened. So it's got a header section with our logo, our tagline. It's got a show help section. This show help button hides or shows the help section, and then of course the title of the form and the details in the form. And we've got some information that shows up if we want to add additional information down below. So it's a fairly simple form. We've been using this for many, many years, and we're collecting information on our webinar, and when we send it up to our site, when we submit it, we're actually generating a PDF. And let me just show you the one that was generated. The PDF generation, we made a mistake and we actually kicked this off a few hours ago, and it's continuing to run and we can't stop it. So you can see that we've got a very strange demo today. But basically, once the form is done, what it does is it generates a PDF to you, and ideally there's 2 links in it. But it says, thank you, thanks for attending, filling out our survey. It sends you a link to the webinar package and to the YouTube video. Now the form, if you look at it again in the designer, it's got these 2 views. It's got a thank you screen, which is just what you saw there with the 2 links in it. And if the links are filled out, it will automatically generate the links. The links are just generated from fields in our form. And so when the form submits, it submits to SharePoint. And SharePoint then synchronizes it to our downstream processing, which does the attachment extraction, generates an email to the attendees, and sends a PDF of that email along with a link and the email to everyone. And so that's our first form. That's our first solution. So we want to show you a 2-part solution, a 2-form solution. So typically, when you're building solutions, you have a form that's collecting data. You have another form that you want to use to find the data, and that's what our dashboard form is about. So I just showed you the webinar form that we're using to collect the data. Let's try this again to see if it's still broken. It looks like it's still broken. So this was working earlier. I'm not sure why it's broken now. Let me see if I can open up another one. It may be that I need to publish the latest version out there. Anyway, we've been working really hard to get the webinar done, and we just kind of missed it at the end here, but with a few bugs like this. But most of it's done, so I'm going to show you the parts that are working. And the next thing I want to show you is the dashboard form. So we have a form that we're using to find these webinar requests, these webinar forms. So we have a webinar request dashboard. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this anonymously. So I'm actually logged in to IE, but if I open this from Chrome, and I can do that in a second here. In fact, let me switch to Chrome right now and do the same thing. This form is going to open and show us all of the 197 webinar forms that we've done over the last year. And it's basically querying that library, and it's giving us some information. So this is typically in a dashboard form. You're going to have, similar to the other form, you'll have a show, hide, help section perhaps. You might have a contact us section at the top. You'll have a header, and that's really the logo, the tagline for your brand, your site. The title of the form, you'll have, most dashboards are going to have a filter section. And the nice thing about this filter section is we can type in, like developing, for example, and we're only going to get those 2 forms, the one I just submitted and the one that I tested earlier with. So it's very fast. If I type in something else, like let's type in dashboard, because we know we have quite a few dashboard forms, you can see that over the years we've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 dashboards. So this is very fast. And the reason for this is that we pull all 197 forms into the form on load. And so it took about 10, 12 seconds or so to load. And then we're just filtering it within the form. And this can be a partial match. So with 365, when you're searching for data, you can see here that we're doing a partial string comparison. In fact, if I typed in just FormsViewer, you can see that I get, let's see if I can type here. These are the 10 or so form, I guess it's 9 FormsViewer webinars we've done in the last couple of years. If I take out the, if I just do this kind of partial match, I should get the same list because that's the partial match, right? Now I can also filter it on the date, and I can say I want everything from let's just say December 1st of last year to today. And that's going to give me a 4 out of the 9 or whatever it was. So we've got this very fast filtering mechanism here. And the way we're doing this is within the form. So let's take a look at the dashboard form. And I'll talk a little bit more about it, but really what we're doing is we've got a rule that runs when we type in the title. We have a rule that runs that, let's see here, it resets the paging, and let me just see if I can find this, this specific rule. The dashboard form has a data source. The data source is pulling from that list, that SharePoint list. And let me just show you this. This is the data source we're pulling from. In fact, if I select the repeating section down below here, you'll see that it's pulling from the webinar form library, which is where it was submitting. And then these filters up on top are actually filtering it by resetting a form logic, a centralized logic secondary data source, and we're actually setting these values here. And in this case, we're actually setting this reset paging value, which is in the main data source. So we've got kind of a bunch of different things we're doing here, but what we're doing is we're firing some rules when that happens. And specifically what we're doing is we're changing the filtering based on the values that are set above. And so in this control here, if we look at the conditional formatting on the right, you can see that even though this is a secondary data source, we can still use conditional formatting to hide the row if it's not part of the filter. So in this case, we've got a kind of a complex calculation here that essentially what it does is it looks at this title and it says let's lowercase it first and then compare it to the current filter, the current title of the current row that I'm on, and if it's equal to it, if it's not equal to it, and the title's not blank, then it's going to hide it. And we have the same kind of filter for presenter and for the date range and so on. So we've created this dashboard form that has this filter, and it's very fast. Once again, this is all working inside of our FormsViewer app. It's a replacement for InfoPath. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So it's very, very fast. And the idea behind this dashboard is we want to allow our customers to go in externally without logging into our 365 site and select a few of these webinars and type in their email and request the kits, the webinar packages. And so that's what we just did. We switched them to a separate view. We say we're going to send you these two packages that you selected, and then they click confirm, and then the form returns to the main view. And what it's doing is it's submitting an XML, and what we'll see here is that many of you may not have been paying close attention, but we're actually updating these counts here on top. When somebody, let's take a look at Breeze to FormsViewer forms, for example. Let's say we want to get Breeze webinar package. Then if we select the command again and confirm it, and if we open up the form again, let's just do that. It takes about 12 seconds to load, and we could probably improve this time a little bit better. Once again, the dashboard, once they're open, you're not going to be going outside of the dashboard. Usually the customers that have dashboards will be living in the dashboard. And so now if we go in here and search for the FormsViewer forms, and once again, it doesn't matter if I'm lowercasing it because we are consulting. We don't have these updated here, so there's a problem there. But if this was working, and it was working earlier, then you'd see these open counts change when we click on confirm. And the idea here is that we want to capture the popularity of the webinars, and we just launched this solution literally for this webinar, so we don't have a lot of counts. But in a couple weeks after we start using this more, what we expect to get more counts. So the idea behind this is that we want to allow our customers to find webinars, to request links to existing webinars, and then we want to capture the stats with that counter. Okay, so we've got these two different forms. The first form is collecting our webinar data. It's also sending the attendees the information if they fill out the survey. And the second form is the dashboard form. So this is a very common pattern. You're going to have a form that collects the data, another form that searches the data, right? And I've kind of given you a little bit of an idea of how we did the dashboard form with these filters. We are just querying a SharePoint library, and then we're filtering it within the form. And because all of the data is in the form, we don't need to worry about the limitations of SharePoint not allowing us to filter substring text. So we can filter part of the text. We don't have to have an exact match. In addition, this works really well for libraries that have less than 5,000 or 10,000 different entries. And for our webinars, we do a maximum of about 45 or so a year. So we'll never have that many. I mean, after 10 or 20 years maybe we will, but right now we only have 297 of them. So it works really well. Now you could be saying, Patrick, well, what about the issue with counts? Because we're submitting, the dashboard has these different sections, right? It has a section for the header, filtering, we talked about that. It has a section for displaying results, and it has a section at the bottom, the footer. And this is it, right? Header, filtering, body with the actual results. And once again, we have this paging as well because we've got so many items we don't want to display them all. So we've got paging, so we can page between the different pages, which is a good practice because we don't want to show everything in one big screen because it could be a little bit slow. So we've got this nice, and all dashboards are going to have the same kind of a layout. They're going to have header, footer, filtering, and they're going to have body. Now in addition, we've got some logic. We've got these data connections that are pulling in the data. Let's just talk about this again. So we're populating the dashboard from that library. We're loading all the data on load, and that actually helps us with performance because everything is in the form. So it works really well. We're doing paging to reduce the amount of display time. And then we're doing this cross-reference on the stats. So we're actually pulling the stats in from a separate list. We have a separate list where we're submitting to every time someone requests a form. We're pulling in the stats from that, and we're calculating it on open. It's not working for the case we just saw, but it is working for other cases. So we've got a bug we need to fix. In addition, what we're doing is we're filtering it, like I said, in the form to reduce the amount of delay. And it's very fast. In fact, very, very happy with the performance once the form loads. It's a bit slow to load. It takes 12 seconds or so, but once it loads, it's very fast. So that's the data filtering. Now, the logic that we have here, when they click on that confirm button, we're doing two things. We're saving the data out to the SharePoint list. And let's take a look at the form designer again. So when they click on confirm, we're submitting the form to the list. Now once again, we're using the best practice here, which is to centralize the logic. We don't want to have a whole bunch of submits on different buttons. So we've centralized the logic for this to our form logic, our submit command here, which is, where is it? Is it in the main data source? It's actually in the secondary data source. We've got, ideally, you don't want your form logic to be in the main data source. You've got this kind of split up in this case. But you can see here that when they click on submit, it's running these commands. So it's actually generating the form name. It's actually calculating the count, setting the submit date, and then it's doing two things at the end. It's submitting first to the list, and it's submitting each item to a separate list. I'm going to show you that list in a minute. And then it's actually submitting the entire request to the library. The reason why we're submitting to the list is so that we can generate counts. We want to normalize the data. If they request 2, we want to generate 2 rows. If they request 5, we want to generate 5 rows. And that allows us to very easily calculate the counts. So if I go to the list here, here is the list. And you can see, actually, it's right here, webinar stats list. This is what we're submitting to. And this is basically creating one row for every different submit. So we've been testing this a little bit already, but you can see here that we've got rows here for each of these webinars that we're requesting. And you can see the ones I did down below here for Bree's webinars right there. And actually that might be Jimmy, so it might be, at any rate, there are a couple up above here maybe, but I need to get the date and time and so on. But this is the list that we're submitting to. So we're taking a variable number of requests and we're submitting it to a list as separate rows. And the reason we're doing that is so that we can easily count the stats when they open the form. And then finally we're submitting the request to the library so we can generate the email. So when we submit the request, it goes ahead and it submits it to this back-end piece that generates the PDF and the email and extracts the images. And like I said earlier, this has been running for quite a while now, but it's generating this email like this, and if we have links in there for the download package, it includes those. Otherwise, it includes the links for the YouTube video. So this is the process, and this is all quite possible with the technology we have today. And I'm in Japan. This is a picture of one of my favorite hiking destinations here. It's called the Katsuoji Temple with the fall colors in full swing. So really what I wanted to talk about today is that we've been working very hard over the last 3 years now on this replacement for InfoPath called FormsViewer. And we kind of think of it as your InfoPath flu shot to protect against the potential meteor strikes or viruses that Microsoft throws at you. We've seen a bunch of different, well, Microsoft has deprecated the technology and they're supporting it until 2026. So we feel pretty good about that. There's no migration path right now. They've talked to us just 2 weeks ago about changing Power Apps to provide more InfoPath functionality, but they're not talking about migration path. So we have a zero to minimal migration path for you, zero to minimal cost migration path, and that's FormsViewer. That's out there today. We've got people using it. We're using it. It works really well. Not only is it the only app out there that migrates your forms as is, but it includes a whole bunch of features, including the submit to SharePoint list that we saw with the dashboard form. When you request multiple items, it submits them to a list to allow us to count the stats for them. But it also does things like sorting tables, and there's like 50 or so different commands out there that are extended to use with InfoPath so that you can do things like send links to people. They can open a form and approve it without having to log in. They can copy data from one table to another. They can calculate the difference between dates. I mean, there's an infinite number of things. Well, it's not infinite, but there's a very large number of extensions that you can use today. These are the extensions that Microsoft should have added to InfoPath back in 2010 or 2013. We've done that for them. And we've got a much better performance. So even though we have a little bit of a lag on load, it's not terrible. It's kind of like InfoPath Form Services. We're working on the performance on load. But in general, the performance is better once the form loads because we're not doing any postbacks. We're not doing any sending data to the server. And that results in a much faster performance for you. Normally an InfoPath form in the browser will have that, sending data to the server or, please wait. We don't have any of that unless you're querying. If you're querying or submitting, you're going to get the spinning dots. But that's because you're actually doing something and you're either posting the data to the server or you're querying data. In all the other cases, you're not going to be posting back to the server. Unlike InfoPath today, FormsViewer is all client-based, and so it's very fast. And then we also extend the forms and allow you to externally log into them. In fact, what we'll do here, even though our webinar is a bit slow here with these, the server still processing all these requests, I'm going to actually put the link in the webinar here and have you fill out this form. What I'll do is I'll we've got FormsViewer installed on our 365 site. We've got a lot of forms in here. One of them is the webinar request form. So I'm going to actually copy this link and put it into the webinar. And we'll have you fill it out. And you can ask questions. We've got I think that's pretty much it then for the webinar today. We got so the webinar, I've just chatted the link to the webinar request form. Please try that out. You should not have to worry about logging in. So really what I'm showing you here is this ability to fill out a form without logging in to our 365 site. You should be able to open the form and to actually see our webinars and search on them and hit request. Please try that out now. That's the poll, so to speak. Now, if you send us a request, you will get an email back. You have to fill out your email and all that. It may take a few more minutes because we're still processing this backlog, but please try it out. And anyway, I want to just underline the fact that your Forms Future is now. We've got a solution for you so that you can stop waiting for Microsoft. You can continue the development of your form solutions. We've got quite a few customers that are really excited about that. We're here for you, and here's another picture of the maple leaves in Japan. We talked about how to extract images in last week's webinar. If you've got questions, now's a great time to ask them. I apologize for the rough nature of the webinar. We were trying to get everything working at the end, and like oftentimes, we often try to put a lot of stuff into the webinar. We had logged, we basically pulled all of these webinar forms in, and they're still processing, so I can't show you a live email getting generated because it's still got this backlog. But the idea behind this is that we do have the ability to generate emails, PDFs from these forms, and we can help you set that up. It's not hard. We've talked about this in many webinars in the past, but the key point for today's webinar is really to highlight the fact that you have a path forward for your forms, and it's a very low-cost path, zero to low cost. You can take FormsViewer app. It's a free install. You can install that today. You can extend it with the QRules functionality. That's free. We don't charge you for the QRules license if you use FormsViewer. In addition, it's better performance. It allows for external access, and we're happy to be here and support you. And we've got one question. Thanks, David, for being here. Does the app convert existing forms to FormsViewer, or is it just new forms? No, it's as is. This is a great question. So it takes the forms as is. So if we go to our SharePoint site, let me go back to my webinar form. So this is the form library, right? And this is actually an InfoPath XML form library. And what I've done here is, if I go into library settings and click on, advanced settings and click on edit, it'll open this in the InfoPath Designer. So we've taken the InfoPath form library and we've just pointed the links to open it up in FormsViewer. So FormsViewer doesn't change anything. There's no conversion. It takes the form template as is, opens it up in the browser. So you don't have to change anything. We do have a few customers that will, if you're using digital signatures, we don't support that. There's a few, kind of corner cases that we don't support. But in general, we're going to support your form as is. So this is just a stock form library, and if we click on new, what I've done here is to configure this. You can basically just change a few things. You have to go in and edit the page. The only thing you really have to do is edit the page and add a reference to this JavaScript that opens the form in FormsViewer as opposed to InfoPath Form Services. So if we go into the web part, you go down to the bottom here on the right, and you'll see that we have added this special JS link here to open this up with FormsViewer link. And this is what's actually telling it to redirect to FormsViewer. But FormsViewer takes the InfoPath form as is, doesn't change the XSN, doesn't change the XML, opens it up as is, submits it as is. So it's really meant to not change anything. You should be able to use it as is without any change to your forms. Works for existing forms and for new forms and anything. And I hope that answered your question, David. Thank you for asking it. And we have, of course, documentation out on our InfoPath Dev website. We've got quite a few people using FormsViewer now, and we're really excited about it because it is the only solution, like I said, out there today that allows you to migrate your forms as is. And it's not just about protecting your form against the future of InfoPath, but it's also about extending them. So you can use it side by side. You can use it and you can open it up in FormsViewer, you can open it up in InfoPath, or both. We have quite a few documents out here on FormsViewer, including the document on how to configure the links. So I suggest you go out there and take a look at that. It took me 5 minutes to do it for this webinar, so it should be pretty easy for you. And thanks, David, for asking that. That's pretty much it for the webinar. We will be here next week. We'll talk about something. If you've got something you want us to talk about, please send email to webinars@qdabra.com. We don't have a specific topic yet. We tend to talk about things that customers are experiencing, so we're pretty fluid about it and dynamic. We do have one topic that we'll probably talk about, and that is how to add links in your form so that you can open up the form from email. We've talked about this more in the past as well, but it seems to come up quite a bit, so we may actually do the webinar on that. I want to thank you all for being here. I hope you have a wonderful, delicious Thanksgiving day in the United States. I'm missing out big time here in Japan, but I'm really happy that you joined me for the webinar today, and we'll get this posted on YouTube and send you the package. We've got a very short 4-question survey to fill out. It's fun. Hope you guys have a great day. Take care.